some way to avoid conflict. We're afraid we might hurt their feelings. Oh no, if I don't do it, will they even receive this help? Or, oh gosh, are they going to be offended if I don't want to hang out? Or whatever it is, it's putting their needs above ours. And definitely as women, we're taught to feed the babies first. And so it's just like this natural instinct to want to help people and to not disappoint, to not aggravate, frustrate, whatever it is. And I think that tends to be part of it. And we don't want to be an asshole.
Yeah.
We don't want to be mean. We're afraid, like, oh no, if I'm assertive, I mean, that's really common. I hope it's okay that I cuss. Women, typically, if we're assertive in some way, I think this is changing, but like, oh, you're a bitch. And so I think that's part of it as well, is like, we're like, I don't want to show up as that. So sure, I'll do that for you. Sure. Let's hang out at 10 o'clock at night, even though I prefer to be in my pajamas and not seeing anybody. Whatever it is. Yeah.
That's so true. And I think it is more of a woman thing because I mean, I just feel like I grew up, I lived with my grandma for a little bit and I was raised by other strong women and it was always like, well, be polite, go say hi to this person, like doing all these things like okay, you have to do this, you have to go to church, you have to say hi and you have to spend time with these people and um yeah, I feel like men don't really get that same conditioning at all.
No, theirs is totally different. We could talk on that as well. I think one of the guys' biggest ones is their inability to ask for help
Mm,
because they're the fixers.
yeah.
Whereas we typically show up as more of compliance. And
Yeah.
that's right. That's kind of what not setting a boundary is.
So, okay, how did you start implementing this in your
Yeah.
life?
So, like I said earlier, it was honestly checking in with myself as an ongoing practice. And at first, it was kind of like not exactly scheduling it, but like being really firm of, all right, how do you feel before teaching this class or hanging out with this friend? And just noticing little check ins, body scans like, how does my heart feel? Is my heart a little racy? Do I have that kind of like anxiousy feeling? Am I like really kind of feeling frustrated already? Like, I do this, then it's not going to be until the afternoon when I free up and right, whatever it is, just noticing those little things. So really translation is identifying when I was a yes and identifying when I was a no. And if I was a yes, declare it yes and like be really excited and even use the words yes, I would like to do that, rather than like sure, maybe, I don't know, be really clear.
Mhm.
And
That's
when
a
I'm a
really good
no,
point.
yeah, the sures, the maybes, meh, try to get really clear. Notice, are you a yes or are you a no? um and then if you're a no, then figure out what you need. Now if we're looking at job, then it might not be the easiest thing. Just be like, this job I'm actually a big no to, and so I'm not going to work today. I wished we could all do that. But that's probably not the reality. But you can notice and then realize, recognize, acknowledge, I'm a no for this. Even maybe even taking it further and writing out like why.
Mm,
um, and then taking steps to remedy that. And so if we are looking at career, then that might be starting to look at different job options, evaluate maybe even in that current situation that you have, is there some way, is there something that can be changed or modified? Is it even just as simply as asking for what you need so that it feels more respectful and supportive, and fill in the blank. So checking in physically, mentally, energetically, even spiritually, right? Like not as in like spiritually as in like your energy, how you're showing up. Are you really moody when you go somewhere? If you're really moody when you go somewhere, then maybe you don't need to go there.
yeah.
I use the like guiding factor of it, using a friend as an example, like putting myself in a friend's shoes. If I invited a friend over, let's say, like, come over at 10 o'clock, and we're gonna drink. I don't drink, and I don't do anything at 10 o'clock, so this is an absurd situation. Um, but so, yeah, I invite a friend over at 10 o'clock, and we're gonna drink. That friend doesn't drink, and she's actually more of a morning person. If I know that about her, I don't want her to come over because I don't want her to do something that she doesn't want to do,
Right.
right? And so then noting that about myself, that I'm not a night owl, I don't drink, I might say, I really appreciate the invitation. I would love to see you. Would it be okay if we schedule something for the morning or midday? Can we grab lunch? It doesn't, boundaries aren't, I think the thing we're afraid of is being really mean and assertive. And it is assertive, but they don't have to be mean. That's taking it to a different um, level or something else entirely. Um, we can ask for what we need and want and still be really compassionate while we do it.
Yeah. And I love that. That's such a good point. I feel like I'm working on this right now. It's like, it's not just saying no sometimes because maybe you do want to spend time with that person, just not in that capacity. It's more of like a redirection of like
Yeah.
something that works for both of you rather than what only works for that one person.
Yeah. Or and to that same regard, and then it's boundaries are respecting the other person as well. So I don't like evenings and I don't want to drink, but if I invite my friend to breakfast at 9 a.m., she's not a morning person. So if I'm like, oh, well, I can only get breakfast, then that's also not meeting their needs. And so there's some give and take in the sense of just being open and honest. I think communication is one of the biggest pieces really of anything. But when we're looking at boundaries, it's using your words so that people know, because if you don't express it, no one has any idea what's going on inside your little noggin.
Yeah. And that's true. And I think, have you, and I think sometimes you go along with something for so long because you are a people person or you've just had this pattern, you've been that way. So I think sometimes it can be a little shocking for someone when you say no or when you try to redirect. Like, have you encountered that? What happens when someone kind of pushes back on you?
Definitely. So the truth is, setting boundaries can disrupt relationship systems,
Mm, mhm.
especially if someone is always used to you being super compliant. Yes, I'll do that. Oh, sure, that's fine. La, 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 la. And the first time you say no, or I actually don't like that, or even if it's as simple as I'd actually like to eat at this specific place, um, there's a chance that people are going to have some resistance to that.
Mhm.
Um, and there's other cases where the resistance isn't as bad as we might have imagined. Um, and it's typically the people who were benefiting somehow from your lack of boundaries that are going to be upset by them. And again, like we talked earlier, that's them, that's their feelings, their thoughts, their beliefs, and we have absolutely no control over someone else. What we can do is show up as kindly and compassionately both for ourselves and for other people, and the rest is out of our control.
Mhm. And that's so true. And I think the way that you said like having compassion for the other person, I think that that's so true. Like we think maybe before you set boundaries, you think having compassion means doing what they want you to do, but really at a certain point, maybe you having compassion for them and setting your own boundary allows them to maybe grow in a different and new way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And oftentimes people don't even necessarily realize you feel or think a certain type of way unless you speak it. And so unless we give them the opportunity to meet us, to respect that boundary, then they don't even necessarily know that they're stomping on ground where we have a fence actually posted up. So I think it's really important to give them the opportunity by simply speaking up, yeah, in a compassionate way. I think one thing that's important to note, kind of like while we're here, is on the compassion piece, on like asking for what you need. And anyway, there's so many examples that we could do. Let's give an example of like you're talking to someone and you have a different viewpoint, you have a different belief. That's really common right now. Okay. So an example of not a boundary and just being, quite frankly, an asshole would be like, there's something wrong with you. Something along those lines. What you could say is, I don't agree with that. I have a different belief. I don't share the same belief, right? We can, even in times where we very much butt heads and don't agree with someone, we can still show up respecting ourselves. So we don't stand up for what we believe in or show ourselves respect or another person respect, but also not be a jerk to the other person at the same time. Not all confrontation is bad. It's typically one extreme or the other. We've got people pleasers who are kind of like a rug, walk all over me. You can sweep stuff under me. Sure, fine, whatever. I'm a rug. That's me. That's been me most of my life. Or on the other side of that is aggressive behavior. There's something wrong with you. I'm going to block you. I can't even talk to you. Things like that. In the middle ground, that's where boundaries are. That's where respect is. Respect for selves, respect for other people.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I feel like I've been both of this person. And
Yes. So, okay. So, really good point. So, often, especially if we show up as the people pleaser, because our needs aren't being met, because we're being walked on or not feeling heard, seen, valued, whatever, then we're going to get aggravated at some point. And then it's going to come out as fiery and mean and not, we probably really just mean to say, I really don't like it when you say that. And instead, it's like, you're the
yeah.
worst ever. Rah! Yeah.
And I think that comes to like when people say something, I take things so personally. So when people say things that I disagree with, instead of, and this is me working myself, now I realize like, okay, that doesn't have anything to do with me. Like that is just their opinion. Like I don't need to take that on. And I feel like I'm proud of myself because I've recently said that you have to right now with everybody has a different opinion of what's going on in the world. And like I would just get so I feel like personally offended. And I'm like, that's their opinion. It has nothing to do with me. And I feel like that's like a boundary. Talk about like a boundary you set with yourself. Like not even
Yeah.
like a boundary with others, but like that's it's technically is a boundary with others, but that's also a good point. Like, do you set any boundaries with yourself? Like, I kind of started doing that. I have this app that it checks in with me 8 times a day and it says like, what are you feeling right now? And I just
Ooh.
realized like I was just overthinking everything all the time. So a boundary I'm trying to set with myself is like stop overthinking. You know what I mean? Like don't let yourself go down this rabbit hole. Make a decision, you have a thought, don't be mad at your thought, don't be mad at what you're thinking about the other person. Like don't go down that rabbit hole. Just that's a boundary I'm trying to set with myself. Which is a whole other ball game.
It is. It's like boundaries with yourself. That's amazing. I think we need to have another talk and talk about that because, yeah, that's huge. I never even thought about it exactly like in that light, but one, I love it. 2, I want to know what app that is. And 3, I do have some boundaries with myself.
Ooh, let's
Um,
hear it.
so one of them's really simple, and it's also an app. It's literally the screen time app, because if I don't limit it, then it's just this thing that can go wild and unruly, and I'm scrolling, and then I'm physically feeling anxious and depleted because too much time on the gram, and I'm now stuck in comparison and feeling really bad about myself for no reason, right?
Yeah.
Or my eyes hurt and I'm strained. And so I've put a physical boundary on limiting the app, because I could say myself, and I did for months, it was a goal, of I want to spend less time on my phone. One, that's really not clear. How much time less do I want to be on my phone?
Right.
And then I can say, sure, I only want to spend 30 minutes a day on Instagram or whatever it is. I can't monitor that necessarily myself. So I needed to
Addicting.
enforce a boundary. And so my phone will time out, when I've spent too much time on it. And you can of course like go back in and modify it. Like you can go through and hijack it, but at least then you have a moment of like, you really gonna do that? You got a choice here. So
Yeah,
that's
I
one
think
boundary.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great
Um, yeah. For iPhone users, I can say that I know that's a free app, and it's just like it comes on your phone these days. I don't know about Android, but I'm pretty sure there are so many apps that you can get for free for screen
tool.
time monitoring. Another one is in the morning, and it's also about like not grabbing my phone the first thing when I wake up. It's so easy to do, but it's really not helpful. I feel really tired if I like immediately grab my phone, which is why I wear glasses. These are not prescription glasses, they're to filter the blue light from screens, because I get serious eye strain and headaches. And then I just feel really tired because my eyes are so dry and strained. And so I don't pick up my phone first thing in the morning. I'll come outside and do at least a 5-minute meditation. I don't start anything about my day unless I have 5 minutes to myself. And that's the bare minimum. It took a really long time to start that. I knew I wanted to start my morning more intentionally, giving to myself as a giving person. I It's literally my line of work. I work with students and clients, and I love it, but I have to take care of myself as well. And so that was a boundary that I enforced of I have to at least have 5 minutes to myself, whether it's more of a official practice where I do a guided meditation, or even just set a timer for 5 minutes and follow my breath, or just stare out. I'm in the middle of the woods essentially, so there's just beautiful greenery everywhere. Or whatever it is, just giving myself that time. Yeah. Another boundary I'm working on, and it's kind of like you, an ongoing thing, is not reacting from an emotional state. And that's one that's going to take a really long time. I also take things really personally. And so it's really easy for me to be like, oh, either super justify myself, or sorry, I didn't even mean it, whatever. Like taking a step back and just notice what's going on within me. Why do I even have this urge to apologize? Or why am I feeling anxious? Why am I mad? Whatever it is, stopping for a second and even giving myself a few moments to be able to respond rather than react.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And those are some really good tips. And I think what has helped me in relation to not reacting from such an emotional place is, again, just having compassion for other people and the world. I feel like the kind of the state that we're in right now makes me feel more compassion for everybody, because I'm like, we've never received this much information. We are confused, we are uncertain, we are dealing with sickness, illness, death, loss of jobs, unemployment, um, and uncertainty. I think uncertainty really affects people more than they realize because our whole lives are kind of like planned out. And especially for people that, like, as an entrepreneur, I feel like you have to be a little bit more comfortable with uncertainty. Like, that's been a really big practice for me is being really uncomfortable with uncertainty. But if you're maybe, in a 9 to 5 and you're not as comfortable with uncertainty because you like that certainty of your weekly hours, your same paycheck, blah, 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 blah. So when something comes in and sweeps you off your feet, people aren't equipped to handle that. When we've been in school our whole lives and followed this pattern and keep following this pattern, we're really, as a society, not equipped to handle this uncertainty.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I
yeah,
give an analogy?
yes.
So imagine either and you could probably reflect back a time that you were hiking or you went on a run and you're getting really tired, but there's only a half mile left. Or maybe it was even in school when you had to run a mile and you're like, I'm not going to make it. But you know that there's only a little bit left. You know the end. You know that the end is near. You know that it exists and you can see the finish line. Right now, there is no finish line. We don't know what comes next. So we're just running and it's getting tiresome. Our muscles are fatigued. Our brain is like, nope, you can't. Because, right, that's the first thing that gives up. That's what's happening in real life day to day. And we have no idea when things will change. And there's a fear that we're going to go back, to strict quarantine, stay at home orders, things closing. In North Carolina, where I'm based, the phases have had to be paused. Phase 2 is paused for 3 weeks, which meant gyms and studios could not open. And then they just found out, I believe it was yesterday or sometime this week, they're going to be closed another 3 weeks. And so, yeah, there's so much uncertainty. We're running and we have no idea when this race is going to finish. And that puts people on edge for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a
We've,
good point.
Go ahead. You and I have talked about how in some ways this time has been nice and it feels like a gift. There are some benefits to it. And I will say, even with that, it's still unnerving to not know when things will change. It's, as a planner, I don't know how to exactly plan for the future. And so we totally digressed here, but it's really important to notice, I guess, if we're bringing it back to boundaries, if we are feeling uneasy in this uncertainty, to recognize that within ourselves and do whatever we need, whether it's internally or externally, to respect our boundaries. If we need more rest, to rest. If something needs to change with work, especially with wearing masks and things like that, to make a stand and ask for what you need. Yeah, this is such a time to be alive.
It's crazy, man, but it definitely helps me have compassion for people. I'm like, you do
Yes.
you, boo. Like,
Yeah, it put things in perspective for sure. It
yeah.
really has. Yeah.
Um, one thing I
Reel
want,
it in.
yeah, back to boundaries.
But it's so important to talk about. Okay.
I know, I know.
It's real
And
life.
really, anything can be a boundary, I guess.
It is. It's so one of the things in preparing for this, you would ask me how I would define boundaries, and boundaries are the hardest thing to put into exact words.
Hmm.
So to me, boundaries are a way to ask for respect and what you need and you want, and also then to give that to others.
Mm.
compassionately, of course. And boundaries are vital to healthy, loving, and respectful relationships.
Mm.
And so a boundary can be literally anything, like in the morning, not checking your social media. That's a boundary we can do with ourselves.
Mhm.
Saying no to social engagements that we don't really want to do. Um, Whatever it is, they show up in all parts of our lives. There's no part of our lives that they don't apply to.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I think that's a really good point. Um, and something else I wanted to talk about that I was reflecting on was because I was just thinking about my own journey and how I finally came to a place of like, wow, I haven't been respecting myself or my time or anything like that. And I think it really came for me with developing my muscle of like self-worth and like self-respect, which makes me kind of scared. I'm like, did I not like respect myself at all before? And I really think that boundaries came after I developed this self-confidence, self-worth, self-respect. Um, yeah. And so I'm just wondering what you think about that and if you kind of relate to that.
I do, and I think everyone here will as well. Um, Boundaries 100% are tied to our self-worth. And if we don't have that piece of self-awareness and confidence and respect, then they're pretty much impossible to one even formulate. We talked at the very beginning where we were like, what is a boundary anyway? I don't even
Mhm.
know, and I don't know how to do it. Yeah, if you're not in touch with yourself and have confidence in your being and to speak up for what you need, yeah, boundaries they're not going to just happen. Um, People with low self worth or people pleasers, however you want to frame it, always struggle with setting healthy boundaries. Um, Typically, we're more concerned with the other person and their needs. We don't want to hurt the other person. We don't want to cause conflict. There kind of gets that to be like a problem solver for someone. Oh, yes, I want to help because then that makes us feel better.
Mhm.
Um, not upsetting them or making sure they get their way. Again, putting someone else's needs in front of us. Um, and so by cultivating inner trust, confidence, esteem, literally knowing ourselves, we can then in turn recognize when there needs to be a boundary and then work there to implement them.
Yeah. Yes. Um, self-worth, man. That was a tough one.
Yeah, I feel like it'll be one of those that is like life work where we're doing the first steps. We've accomplished the first steps, recognizing that it exists and then how it exists and shows up in our lives, and then moving forward. But then I think I'm at this stage where it's a zombie belief, where it's still there. It's still there. It's not my autopilot as much anymore, but it's still there. And so when life happens, which it does, it comes up and it's like, oh, hey,
Yep.
you're being lazy today. You're not worth anything. And so it's checking it. Um, that's happened to me this week. And I was like, hey, it's not true. I'm gonna check it. And even then I was like, well, I honestly I acknowledge that my productivity does not equal my self-worth. It does not equal my value. And at the same time, I can acknowledge that I feel kind of shitty right now because I'm not doing anything. So it's kind of like the meeting ourselves where we're at. Okay,
Hmm.
that's not true. Acknowledging that it's not true. But then also acknowledging how we feel, because pushing away how we feel isn't going to help
Hmm.
anything.
Yeah, agreed. And I think recognizing how we feel, and I think that quarantine has helped with this because most of us have had more time to like sit with ourselves
Yeah.
and I've just had a lot of reflections like, wow, I like this time by myself. And then at one point I realized like, wow, I'm lonely, which is something I've never have ever felt. Like maybe a couple times, because like I just like being alone and I can usually
Hmm.
occupy myself. And then there was this one day where I was like, oh, I'm lonely. Like never noticed, because usually I'm like going, doing, blah, 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 all over the place. So I think it's really helpful to just have this time. And that's another reason I'm grateful for this is to have this time like, okay, this is how I'm feeling, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling tired, and it's okay. Like everything, I just give myself permission for. I'm like, I'm gonna take a nap. Okay. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
giving myself permission for literally everything, which
Yeah.
is really freeing, honestly.
Hmm. And a sign of a boundary with yourself, of allowing for what you need or
Hmm.
what you don't need,
Hmm.
saying no.
Yeah. Um, and something else that we talked about before when we were just kind of talking about this conversation is how to reinforce your boundaries.
Yes. Yeah. So we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier
Mhm.
in when first kind of implementing boundaries, people maybe not taking it the best way. So having resistance. It's one of those things where you have to maintain. You can cut your grass once and it looks a lot better, but the grass will grow and so you're going to need to mow the lawn again. And so the same thing is just showing up again and again. You might even use the analogy of showing up on your yoga mat. You're not going to just go once and be like, I'm cured of all things and I
Yeah.
never need to unroll my yoga mat ever again. Or I ate a salad and now I'm so healthy and have all the nutritional content for my whole life. No.
Yeah.
So, like anything, we need to continue to enforce them. And especially if we're looking at like one particular person who seems to just not get it, um, that's probably a different, slightly different scenario, but really it just requires us to be firm, compassionate but firm. No, I don't like that. No, I don't want to do that. And again, trying again. Um, Being more specific. I don't like that because like when
Mm.
you do that, I feel blank. And so just trying and trying and trying. And if you become, it becomes a situation of like a repeat offender, if you will, then that's probably time to reevaluate that relationship because I'll say it again, I said it before, the only people who are really going to be offended or upset by you implementing a boundary is people who are taking advantage of you in some type of way or not respecting what you need. Um, and so then it's evaluating that.
Yeah. And I feel like that's my next step for the whole boundary thing is like, okay, I started enforcing boundaries and now I'm at the step of having to reinforce them, which I feel like is probably more challenging.
Yeah, yeah, because we get caught back up into not wanting to hurt people. It might be a situation of not wanting to lose that relationship, not wanting it to change, the fear of how they might react or if the relationship ends or ends as we know it.
Mhm.
Um, I think part of that, one, it's all going to be circumstantial, depending on what's going on, who it's with, all of that. Um, but treading forward compassionately, but not um, sacrificing what you need. Of course, there's always some give and take. But if it's something that really matters to you and it is one of those non negotiables, then there's not too much to be said. And I think going back to earlier of putting yourself in the shoes of a friend, like viewing yourself as a friend. If they were going through that, how would you treat them?
Mm,
What would you even say to them? Like, would you tell them that they're an asshole or asking for what they need or whatever it looks like? No, probably not. Then okay. Like using that to check yourself, because there are ways to, we said it earlier, um, there's a difference between creating, maintaining, and moving forward with the boundary. And then there is just being an assertive jerk. There
right.
are there are ways. There's something wrong with you. You need to get help. And there's when you say that I feel blank.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference there.
Yeah. I think that all makes so much sense. And you said something too that made me think about the relationship or the situation. It maybe it does end as you know it, but maybe it just reshapes into something different.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think sometimes we just need to let go of what we thought the relationship was or the situation was. And we need to let go of that like pattern in our mind and be open to a new pattern, a new type of relationship that is like working better for both people or you if you're setting that with yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And there are other times where it might be time for that relationship to end.
Mhm.
And that does really suck and hurt. And so then honoring, if that is the case, honoring the loss. And essentially there's grief there.
Mm,
The of losing what we thought we had, which in this case it's typically something that we didn't have in the first place. Because if you're just simply asking for your needs now and somehow that's not okay with this other person, then the relationship was likely never healthy. It might be as far as that it was, yeah, I've been dealing with a lot of that this year, and with family, and that's feels impossible and hard, and it sucks. I miss, I'll be really clear, it's my mom and my sister. And right now we're not in relationship. I'm not actively talking to either. Um, and the thing is, while it hurts and while I don't like it and it feels just unwell, I also wouldn't change how I've been showing up. I've
mm,
asked for what I need. I've said, it hurts me when you say this. I
mm,
know that you love me, but when you say this, I don't feel it. And
mm,
to then be stone cold over and over and over, and for that to not be heard, that's also not okay. Even if it's my mom, even if it's my sister, maybe, especially because it's my mom and my sister, it's not okay. And so, as much as I don't like the situation of essentially being estranged from two really close family members, I wouldn't change it because I, for the first time, am respecting myself. I'm not allowing them to control me or to manipulate me or to just say whatever they want to say without any regard to how it feels for me. Um, and so, yeah, I'll pause there. It's a lot, and so I think it's important to honor those losses when they do show up. Um, and you can check in with yourself. Maybe it's a situation where you can also just let go. It's something that maybe it felt super important, but not so much. Or it
mm.
might be something non negotiable, and it pivots the relationship, or you turn, or the door is shut and you put the deadbolt on.
Yeah, you have so many good analogies. Um,
Dude. I love analogies. It's bad.
No, it's great. It helps you, like, okay, it helps you really visualize in your mind, like, okay, U-turn, shut the door for now, maybe I'll open it later, or shut that door, put the deadbolt on it, and bye, you know?
Yep.
Get the hell out of
Yep.
Dodge. Wow, that's so crazy. And so do you think, and this kind of like a personal question, you don't have to answer, but like with your mom and your sister, are you kind of at that spot? Like, are you pausing? Are you kind of, or are you like, no, kind of where do you feel that you're at?
Yeah. So I didn't have any conversation, any connection with them for about 6 months until recently, until May. And at that point, I was feeling more open to try
Mhm.
and maybe we can work on this and feeling more hopeful and trying to be even more compassionate. I had this feeling of, what if I show up even more compassionately? Then maybe somehow that'll solve these problems. But guess what? I only get to choose to be compassionate. I don't get to choose how they show up. So I can be as compassionate and kind as I want. That doesn't mean that they're going to show up the same way. So I've opened the door and I got stung. And so I'm kind of feeling like, you know better. You knew better. And you're back here again.
Ugh.
But yeah, but instead of being mad at myself and beating myself up for knowing better and all of that, I am choosing to think of it as I'm proud of myself for really trying and putting myself out there and being open and letting, like, opening the door for them to also step forward.
Yeah.
Um, but then acknowledging at the same time that I did that and nothing has changed. So
Mm.
it's time to close the door. Um, and it it's so hard. It really is. But I again, like I said earlier, I wouldn't change it. I would not um, change change it at all. I This is the first time I've literally ever stood up for myself, and it's really simple things, um, and they just aren't okay with it. And so that's a case of where resistance is paramount. They're very confused. Casey's always just gone along with everything we've said and done, and now she's like got opinions and thoughts, and she's mean. She's selfish, which then breeds a whole other world of issues. Um, but I recognize that that's not true.
Yeah.
And if I were talking with one of my students or a coaching client and she was coming to me with these things, I would want to hug her and let her know that she's respecting herself and there's nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't berate her and be like, "Here, maybe you shouldn't do that," or whatever it is. And so reminding myself to extend that same kindness to myself. And I'll also say that the door is closed, it's locked, but there's a peephole. Like I'm open for them to come back and let's talk and let's go to family therapy, whatever it is. Like I'm willing, but it is, I've set my boundary, right? The door is locked. That's the boundary. And there's a lock on it. You're not going to just walk back in.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go forward. Cool. But things need to happen because I do need respect.
Yes. That's awesome. And thank you for sharing that. And I think that's probably really, I think those analogies are like super helpful to people.
It helps conceptualize things
It
that
really,
feel, yeah.
you can close the door, someone can knock on it. It's,
Yeah. I got a window. I can look out.
Yeah. Look out the window. They can knock. Maybe it's up to them to knock.
Yeah, yeah,
I
for
love
sure.
that. Um, do you have anything else that you want to say?
I don't think so. I think it first comes down to implementing your boundaries is noticing how you show up, checking in with yourself, whatever it is that you're doing, um, and noticing those little signs, because how you feel physically, mentally, and otherwise, that's all information for you to take in and use.
Yep.
Um, and from there, recognizing when you're a yes, recognizing when you're a no, recognizing when you're a no and you've said yes. And then how does that feel? How does it feel
Ooh,
then when you're doing that? Yeah, those are the biggest game changers. And vice versa. Was there something that you didn't say yes to for whatever reason? How does that feel? Recognizing the yes and the no. And as you go forward, especially if this is really foreign and it's a new concept, then to practice in small ways. There are a few ways you can do that. You could do it with a friend who you have this conversation with, right? Like, I'm really struggling with boundaries. And maybe it's someone you know that also struggles. And so you can be boundary accountability partners. And within that relationship, it might be a little silly, but looking for opportunities to really use your no and your yes, and literally saying it so you can practice. We'll call it like the baby nose. So just
no.
within that relationship, practicing what it's like to say no or to really declare your yes. And you can do that with other relationships, and probably no one actually would notice. um, it goes kind of back to also notice when you say sure or maybe, and notice which one you really are. Are you a yes or a no? Maybe is totally a category, but for the most part, if you're a maybe, you're undecided. So sit with it and figure that out. And so the clearer you can be with yourself, then clearly you'll be able to be clear with other people, and therefore more in touch with your needs, your wants, the things that aren't okay, and be able to implement boundaries.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Um, okay, I don't know if anyone's watching, but if you have questions, let us know. I'll give everybody a minute to
Yeah,
check in because I think there's a little bit of a delay.
there is. I think Lindsay tuned in. Hey, girl.
Hey, Lindsay.
And for anyone who's watching, whether you're here live or you've got the replay, if anything resonated with you or you have questions, comment, and Lauren and I are both here. We'll continue the conversation.
It's an ever continuing conversation for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and follow Casey and all of her amazing, she makes the most amazing like essential oil blends and like tea blends. And yeah, she's just amazing and very like peaceful. So, so follow her, check in with her, and yeah, let us know if you have questions because clearly we are experts. No, we're all just figuring this out and we can all do it together. Thanks
Exactly.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
Yes, thanks for joining.